Welcome to What's Possible, Next Level Thinking with World-Class Coaches. I am very excited to have Sandy Lewis here today. Sandy has become a wonderful friend, and she's a colleague at Silicon Valley Change Executive Coaching. Sandy has done over 800 of the tool that we're going to be talking about today, which is pretty significant. She also is, and now you'll understand why she's been able to do 800. She's been in this space of executive coaching and HR for over 20 years. So she has an extensive background in the space of leadership development. She also is a graduate of MAP, the Masters in Applied Positive Psychology from UPenn. So welcome, Sandy.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Eileen.
So happy to have you. So Sandy, today I asked you to talk about DiSC. And the reason I wanted to talk about that is I know we recently just finished one with one of our clients, a huge offsite. And we thought, okay, what is the best way to bring two teams together and help them understand each other and be stronger as an overall team? And you said, obviously, we need to do the DiSC. When you and I first met, you said, Eileen, you need to do the DiSC. And so it comes out of your mouth almost right after you say, hi, nice to meet you. You need to do the DiSC. So I want to throw it your way. If you can explain what the DiSC is and also maybe what the history is so that we understand this tool, and then we'll play with it.
Sure, thanks. So in my background with organizational development, I knew about DiSC for years. It's been around for a long time. And I really just embraced it probably 8 years ago. And so the DiSC comes from, if we think of Carl Jung, we remember him from undergrad, right? He was Sigmund Freud's disciple. He said there are 4 different personality styles: those that are more driving, those that are more influencing, those that kind of want to keep things steady, and then those that, if for lack of a better word, want to be correct, right, and accurate. And so he called that the Jungian typology indicator. And you can still Google that today and get your style. There are 12 questions. So after that, Myers and Briggs, a mother and daughter team, bought the rights, and they created the Myers-Briggs type indicator, the MBTI, which a lot of us have taken. Still very popular today. I'm also trained in it. And so after that, someone named William Moulton Marston, who also he invented the lie detector test and Wonder Woman, he created Wonder Woman. He took the MBTI and said, I want to make it easier to use in the workplace, easier to use for people to type each other out, not as a predictor, but as a personality type indicator. And so he created the DiSC. And so what we know, there are 4 primary styles, but there are actually 16 styles. So similar to what Carl Jung said, there are the more driving styles, which is a D, and then there are the influencers, which is an I, and then we've got the steadiness, which is an S. Notice I'm going around a circle. And then we've got the conscientious, which is a C. And so people come from, their perspectives are from those quadrants generally. So it involves taking a survey. There's an online survey, and it gives you your results. And as I've said, I use a company called Wiley that uses mine. There are 2 other main ones that are out there. I'm also certified in them. What I like about this, it's an easy way to look at the quadrants. And there are other quadrant models out of there. There's the HBDI, the Herman Brain Dominance Indicator, is one common one. They're the ones, are you an owl or a wolf, or, however that goes. So they're all coming from the same place of, where do I come from? Sure. What might be affecting my perspective? And then most importantly, I think, who am I talking to? What else is going on in their world that might create this interaction?
That's the piece that I really enjoyed when you had me take it, was really being able to see how others, your manager, might view you, as well as how you might interact and work with other people on your team. Often we take these, whether it's a strengths or another assessment, and it's personal, which is wonderful if it resonates with you. However, now what? If we're working in a system, how do we leverage this in a system?
Yeah. So one of the mistakes that companies make, and I've walked into companies as a consultant that have done this, they'll give the survey and then they don't share it with anybody. Yay, I know my style, kind of like, and nothing against how I was trained in Myers-Briggs, but I was trained in Myers-Briggs to know my style. And they didn't talk about, well, how do you work with others? So to me, I'm an executive coach and consultant. I work in the workplace, and I believe that the workplace is where people can flourish. So, okay. So then how do we share that? And that's where facilitation comes in. Workshops can come in. They're just a lot of fun. And, there's that self-identification and let people get comfortable with reading about their style, because I rarely run into anybody that doesn't agree with most of their survey results. So get them comfortable with it, pair them up with someone else. They talk about it, they get more comfortable there. And then eventually we have people get up and talk about their styles more broadly. And I say get up, I mean, there's a lot of virtual work that's done now too, to share your styles. What do you need from other styles? What do you love about your style? I take a strengths-based approach using my master's of applied positive psychology.
Of course you do.
Yeah. And like anything else, we can overuse them as well. But it's more information, right? We have something called the attribution bias, right? Which if something happens, we assign permanence to the other person, right? And something temporary to ourselves. So say you and I just had a disagreement or something, and I go, oh my gosh, here's Eileen. She's always doing it. I just didn't get enough sleep last night, right? So I'm assigning permanence to what's a different way we can look at that? What's other data we can use to kind of keep us out of the deep emotion that we get at work and anywhere, but get us to be more objective and not as amygdala driven as we might be.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be able to zoom out. I think when we're like in the forest with all the trees, it's hard to see anything. And that's what I've always seen with you, Sandy. I have to say, whether it's on our coach calls or interacting with our clients when they come to us and we're having a meeting strategizing about what's the offsite going to look like. Let's pause here. Let's step back, take a bigger view. And you're really so well versed at doing that. And it gets people to get to a place of calm, access the prefrontal cortex. And we want those emotions because they signal something to us. It signals that we're passionate about this. However, we need that kind of wise perspective to step back. And that's what I love about when you bring in the DiSC. It really helps you to look at it from a totally different angle once you've caught your breath.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think it's just very accessible. People have fun with it too. There's a platform now that it came out in January of this year because people were doing so many virtual workshops. The platform, you can see your styles immediately and share styles with each other. And it's just a lot of fun. So when I come and do the workshop after they've seen their styles, and I might have, I don't know, what did I have, 60 people a few weeks ago with you, but I might have 20 or 30 people, and they're already primed and excited because they've started to play with it and they can do comparisons. And it's just another way of looking at how we work together. And it's fun.
Well, and I think when you think about systems, when we're working in a system, it's having understanding. And I think oftentimes we don't understand. And once we do, then the door's open to possibility.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've seen relationships forged that people have had really bad relationships. And then they realize, oh my gosh, I'm digging my heels in too much. And this person really is trying to connect with me. So what does that look like? How can I stretch and look at it in a different way? And I do stress all the time that, the concept of opposites attract, right? We need the people that sometimes are hardest to work with. I'm come from the I quadrant, and I will jump off a cliff and then turn around and look at what I should have done before I did it. I need those people, as much as they annoy me, to say, Sandy, have you done this before? Or what are the challenges? Or, let's look at what might go wrong. I desperately need that. And so those are the strongest relationships I've forged in my corporate life and continue to seek people out like that. Not everybody walks around with their DiSC profile on their lapel or anything. So I also work with people and the platform does as well, to look at how can I identify where they might be coming from. It's not a label. It's not meant to bind people or to be predictive, but again, more information. So, if you think about the quadrant, there's the vertical axis, right? Or what's their energy? Are they outgoing, and are they more active? Or are they more reflective? So the top half of the hemisphere is a DI and the lower is an SC. So you go, okay, that's interesting. Well, they're more reflective. Okay, so then we look at the other side and say, well, they more people focused. You listen for language. Like, I feel that. You hear people say that, right? Use that type of language. Okay, so they're probably on the right-hand side of the hemisphere, an S or a C. In that case, we're looking at their reflectiveness, or sorry, an S or an I, and we say, okay, they're coming from the S quadrant most likely. People
Right.
on the left-hand side of the hemisphere can be more skeptical. I'm sorry, I'm getting in the weeds here a little bit.
No, I love it because again, I just keep on thinking. I know you said it's not a label, and that's one thing that I've always cringed. Back in graduate school when we're trained on all these tools,
Yeah.
and then continuing through coaching, education, all of that, you're trained on things. And for me, I'm always feeling like I do not want to put myself or anybody else in a box. I don't want people boxed into a label. And something clicked for me when you were saying it's not a label. It's an understanding. And I think if we can move from label to understanding, then it really opens that ability to work more collaboratively with people, to understand ourselves better, as well as the people who are in our zone and in our system.
I love that. I'm going to use that. That's great.
So I have a question for you. We've talked a lot about organizations. Because obviously our company gets brought into organizations to work with several leaders at a time, to do offsites, to do large groups. Mm-hmm. What if a listener is listening and they're an individual leader, their company is not sponsoring them to get a DiSC? Obviously, they can come to we work with individuals as well at Silicon Valley Change. And if I were to match them with you, how does that work for them to do the DiSC on their own one-to-one with you?
Yeah, I will administer that for them. Pretty standard for me is to do 2 surveys. One is the DiSC that helps them. Again, I'm an executive coach, right? So, which really means one-on-one. It doesn't really matter the level, but it's definitely workplace. I don't purport to be a life coach. I get into those types of things, but my window in is business. So to me, looking at their type is really, really helpful. And for them to discover, oh my gosh, why might I be coming from this place? I have had a CEO in Germany, and he was coming from at 9 o'clock, which is a C and D. So he's pretty solid in his footing. And his whole work was, why do other people matter? He was a content expert, renowned in his field. He had a company of 50 people. So his work was to go, okay, how do you look at other people and stretch to understand that other people do matter? Because he was so in this content and wanting to be right, he was starting to lose some key people. So I do that regularly with people. And then I also use the values and action inventory strengths tool. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful way to layer on. We do have our negativity bias, right? And so even when we do strengths, people go right to the bottom. Right? Yes. So what are my lesser strengths? Same with DiSC. I want them to remember that even though, that CEO, sure, his style can be stubborn and not so driven with results that they're not looking at the bigger picture. And at the same time, those are strengths too. We need people to go, wait a minute, no, this is how it needs to be. Let's find somebody to influence that, or let's find someone to look more at the personality of the organization, but we need that. So absolutely, it's what I usually do as a course of action.
Anyway, yeah. Can you share a story? It's always helpful to see anything. Actually, I was going to say see tools through a story, but anything in life. It's always nice to be able to hear a story and see the success of something. So, can you share a story where you've used this and have witnessed somebody really thrive as a result of having done the DiSC?
Yeah, in the Western culture, we tend to look at leadership in the kind of driving personality traits, right? If I go to a workshop and I'm doing a leadership workshop, I might ask, give me some traits of a leader. And they'll say, hard driving and decision-making, and they push things and get things done, right? Well, that's part of it. And some leaders can drive like that, which is great. But there are a lot of other leaders that exist in the other quadrants. I'm going to put you in that case, right? Some of the best leaders I've had have been in the steadiness quadrant, right?
Yes.
They are, exactly. You're a perfect case for this, but I had a woman who came to me and actually a man as well, similar, that came and just felt like they didn't know how to be effective. They didn't feel like they were being heard. And they were in this woman was in it was at an operational mining organization. So it was very, driven and masculine, and, they were hammering rocks and stuff like that. And she wasn't sure if she was being heard. And so when we did her disc and saw where she was, it was hard for her at first because she didn't have those driving assets that we think, or attributes that we think leaders should have.
Yeah.
But what she had was this ability to look at who should be in the room, who should be in meetings, who do we have to involve, who do we need, who, right?
Yeah.
A lot of other styles are about what. She
Right.
was about the who, and she was so respected and so trusted. And as a leader, she also developed relationships with clients. They really trusted her too. So in her case, it was really quite transformational to have her embrace who she is, and be able to bring her more authentic self to work. There's a lot of stories like that. And I think authenticity is overused, but I do believe my vision, if I could change the world, would be I would see you, Eileen, and I think I probably would really, but I'd see a leader, at a meeting on Friday morning, and at a soccer game on Saturday afternoon, and then at a party on Saturday night, and I'd see the same person.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, when we might not be telling the same jokes, but I'd see the same person. And way back, long before I had my master's, or long before I knew about DiSC or anything, I was early in my HR career, and I was in banking, and I was sitting there, and we were waiting for the president to come in. And this is like big desks and polished everything and very formal. And I was
Darkwood paneling.
Total. Yeah, completely. You get it. Right. And I was talking to this woman, a man, his name was Danny, and he was an executive vice president. We were talking, and I think we were talking about kids or something like that. It was very relaxed, and he was great. And we were just having this nice conversation. And then the president walked in, and it was like someone inflated him with a bicycle pump or something. He went, and there was this other person. I went, wow. And he brought a whole different energy. It was not, it just didn't feel authentic. And so I knew then, and I was in my 20s, just at my first corporate job, going, this isn't right. What if we can do work to make sure that people can show up as themselves and understand where their strengths are, where they can adapt, where they have to stretch, to be with others, but not have to completely 180.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because people will often say, do you do executive coaching or life coaching? And you touched on it for a second. I wish it was all called life coaching, because it's one person who shows up at work, and that same person shows up at home. That same person is everywhere. And we expect that we're going to compartmentalize, and that, I'm going to coach you on work. Well, it's really hard to do executive coaching if somebody's personal life has gone to pieces. They show up, it impacts how they show up in the work environment. It's one person. And when we can start to see us as a human who is navigating all these different areas, then, we can really appreciate the true individual. And I was telling you, I did a webinar with Robert Mack that will be coming out on managing your energy, and talk about sapping your energy when you have to show up as someone who is not your authentic self in different places in your life.
Yeah.
Taking the opposite of what you said in terms of inflating, it totally deflates you. By the end of the day, you've got to be exhausted because you haven't been able to be your true self everywhere.
Yeah. And I think that when we show up as our true selves, it's generative for us. We're better at work. We're better at home. We're better community partners. We're better at everything. And so how do we help people do that? I'm very much about Chris Peterson, who has passed, but he's one of the fathers of positive psychology. He used to say, other people matter. And I believe that. And so what is mattering at work, right? I don't care if you're part-time janitor who works, from 12 to 2 in the morning, you matter, and the CEO matters, and the secretary matters, and the lab. I work a lot in pharma, and every piece of every person matters in those organizations. And so when people know they matter, but also can be themselves and are heard and seen.
Yeah.
we could talk about psychological safety a little bit. That's what really makes an organization click. And one of the things I'm proud about when I was in corporate, there was always a buzz where I worked. You could feel it. When you go into a place and things are buzzing and you can see people connecting and interacting, and there's an energy with that. Mm-hmm. And so that's how we want our organizations to be, where people feel safe to play and safe to be who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And it becomes contagious. When each individual feels that, it allows other people who they're interacting with to feel that.
Yep. Yeah. Martin Seligman, the founder of positive psychology, one of the three, I guess, he talked about man as a hive, humanity as a hive, right? And I think that image is really great. And I often bring that slide up when I'm talking to companies, because if a hive is running beautifully and everybody's healthy, I mean, it's creating honey and everything's buzzing literally and everything's moving along. But if a bee gets sick, it can kill the hive. Yeah. And so you think about that, right? That weight of toxicity, that weight of trying to shrink yourself and fit in. And I've done plenty of that when I was in corporate at different times. It's draining, and it's draining for the organization. We hire people to be their best selves. And then when we don't let them be their best selves, it's a waste.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great one to end on there. I'm going to ask you now, are you ready to play 1, 2, 3 with me?
Sure.
Okay. I always love of course, I'm open to anything attitude. All right. So what is one mindset shift that you hope that our listeners will take away?
I think that tools can be beneficial, and it's be open to it, right? There are a lot of tests out there. I used to read Glamour magazine and Cosmopolitan and everything, but there are ways to help get more data into how we see the world. And I would say be open to that. And especially if we have organizational development people and L&D people, don't forget DiSC is a really powerful tool, and it's still really valid today, even though it's been around since forever.
And I love that openness to it. And I think also checking in with yourself on, does it resonate with me with that?
Yes.
When you get your results, does this feel like me?
Yeah, it's qualitative. It's how you answer the questions. They have adaptive testing. So you answer a question this way, they're going to ask other questions. They're going to ask other questions. So you and I might show up very similarly, but our survey results are going to look different because they keep asking different questions. It's quite powerful.
Yeah. 2 ideas or facts that you would like to leave our listeners with.
2 ideas or facts. One fact is that leadership does not just show up in the D quadrant, that leaders come from all quadrants, and they've done a lot of work around introversion and extroversion can show up a little bit. Introversion can be on the lower half of the hemisphere, and extroversion can be on the top half of the hemisphere. But generally, we come from all over the place, and it's not about countries even or anything like that. That's one fact. I don't know about another fact. And also genders. Genders are all over the map as well. It's not, we can't just pinpoint women and say they're always going to be on the right hand side of the hemisphere. As a matter of fact, I think when women are on the other halves of the hemisphere, when they come from the C quadrant or the D quadrant, they are strong, and they need to understand that they have that their own messages about themselves need to be quieted because they've been told they're too much, maybe. So, we come from everywhere.
Yeah. I just realized I didn't ask you a very basic question. Can you say what those 4 quadrants are and the hemispheres? Because I don't think we identified where each thing is in the hemisphere and what a D is. I know what it is, but if you could share, I know because you had me do the assessment. So.
Yes. So the D, now I'm going to forget the name of the D. D Dominance. Is dominance. Thank you. So you think of a circle, right? And there's a cross in the middle. So the top left-hand side of the hemisphere is dominance, right? And those people tend to be active and skeptical and more driving. And then on the right-hand side across from them are the influencers. They tend to be more positive and outgoing, and they want to influence others. And then we go down to the lower right-hand side of the hemisphere, which are people that come from the S quadrant, and that's steadiness. These are people that want to make sure that collaboration is something that comes up all the time when I ask, okay, what's important about your style? They're the collaborators. And then we've got conscientious, lower left-hand side of the hemisphere. Those are people that want to make sure things are accurate and they need time. That's why we have agendas for people in the lower half of the hemisphere to understand what's coming and what decisions can be made. And so it's so important. If you think about rising this up further to the organization, it fits in so many ways. We think about, as I mentioned, agendas. People on the top half of the hemisphere might just call meetings. I know I used to and say, okay, let's show up because I want to talk about it. Well, whoa, that's a lot. And I'm married to somebody who's the opposite of me. No, we need to have an agenda so that they know how to prepare. We need to allow time at the end of meetings for discussion. If there's going to be discussion, not just snap and make those meetings as decision-making meetings, and maybe they weren't decision-making meetings. Maybe we allow time and say, get back to us by noon tomorrow if you have questions or comments. So it's also about thought inclusion as well. Very powerful piece that I left out on this.
What was that?
I thought inclusion I left out, and I should have, because we think about, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's also about how are people thinking? How are they approaching things? Very important part.
Absolutely. All right. 3 actions that our listeners can take as a result of what they've heard today.
I would say to look up the tool that I use is called Everything DiSC. It's by Wiley. So I look it up. There's a lot of good information there. There are a lot of good tools to use. I would say step back and think about, in my life, we talked about executive coaching, right? It's humans. It's not just because of their title or their job, but am I living authentically? Am I living in a way that feels like who I am? Or I'm in a place where I have to stretch a lot. Do not make Sandy Lewis an accountant. I was a legal librarian after graduating from undergrad, and I used to have to take naps during my breaks. I was so drained, silently in a room, putting literally pages into binders all day. It was terrible.
I cannot see you. I just cannot see you doing that.
I know. It's terrible. And then the third thing is take a minute when you're meeting with people in any way, just stop and think about who is across from me. Yeah. Who else am I working with? What else might be going on for them? And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Oh, I like that a lot. So I'm going to follow up on that exact question. And this is your final, what we'll leave our audience with is, what's possible when we understand ourselves better and others?
We get along so much better. I mentioned earlier, when we get into conflict or we get stressed, our amygdala, we start getting into that fight, flight, or freeze mode. When we're able to kind of add some more data and calm down a little bit, then I think we can operate more clearly from our frontal cortex. Do you have time for a story real quick?
Of course, yes.
Okay. So all styles are important, right? All styles are important. We all contribute. So I really want to tell you a true story. In the beginning of COVID, my daughter and her son were visiting, and my daughter and her boyfriend were visiting. So I have guests, and my washing machine started to smell, and it was weird. And it had been in the house when we got here. And it probably was, I don't know, we lived here about 5 years at the time. And so I decided I'm going to take the washing machine apart. Why not? We have guests. Supply chain starting to narrow. It's COVID. So I take it apart. And of course, I couldn't get it together again. And so I go to my husband. Again, I'm an I come from the I quadrant. I'm right at 1:00. My husband comes from the CS. So he is both get it right, but also care about others. So he's right at 7:00. We're complete opposites. So I go to my husband and said, we need a new washer. Obviously, it's taken apart everywhere in our laundry room. And I said, I want a top loader. Let's look at this. And so we both went out. And I took 15 minutes, literally. I said, okay, where do we have 0% credit cards and who has stuff in stock? So the Home Depot or Best Buy. I found the washer I wanted in 15 minutes. My husband, 2 days, spreadsheets, completely cranky at me. He kept poking her head in. How's it going? How's it going? Supply chain's running down. He came up with the same exact washing machine as I did. True story.
We didn't have that situation, but that would have happened, that exact scenario in our house, because we are in different quadrants. I I love it. And that allows us to see what you're talking about. We can talk about all this stuff, but until you can see it in action and how it plays out.
Yeah. And healthier times, I know that I'm going to say, let's go here. And I'll say, let's go here, and I'll buy the tickets. He's busily deciding what to do and where we do it and all that kind of stuff. So we learn how to use it and how to speak to each other. And we've been married a long time. It's not always perfect, but it's, we figured it out. But we think about coming into the workplace too. How do we use our best selves with each other? And I think this is a tool that helps get us there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sandy. I always love my time with you.
Oh, thank you. Me too. I feel the same.